So, let me just change some words here. So, I am Emily Grabatin, author of Dare to Decide, Discovering Peace, Clarity, and Courage at Life's Crossroads. And so interviewing me, like I said, there's all kinds of crossroads in life and all kinds of reasons why we get stuck in them. And often they're intermingled with each other too. The reason why we're stuck at one crossroads can often hinder us in another one. And one of those is not living from a sense of brokenness, or you could call it, a victim mindset, or just that it can be scarcity mindset. It can just be, I feel stuck and I don't know why, and you just feel blocked. And a lot of that is stuff and associations from our past, pain, and we're trying to guard our hearts because we don't want to be hurt again. But what that's doing is hurting us from increasing our capacity. If you think of this broken vessel, if it's not healed and put back together, then it doesn't have the capacity to hold the good things that are in store for us, the ability to dream again, to be bigger, to step into that. And I know so often, and you're talking from a place of trauma tonight, and I wouldn't say I've experienced a lot of trauma, but I still lived a lot from my pain or the fears that come with it. I don't want to be hurt or rejected or lost. And so I'm so excited, Cecilia, everybody, to introduce you to Cecilia Tement. She is the author of the children's book, If I Could, I Would. And Cecilia, would you share a bit of your story, how that book came about with us tonight?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on, Emily. I really love what you're doing. I think it is so important to dare to live your best life, your most authentic life. And I'm so happy to be here. I wanted to, kind of work through the pain of my past, and I didn't know how. I grew up in an abusive home with a violent father. And, it was one of those situations where it have impacted my whole life, even though it happened when I was a child. And he moved out when I was 14. The trauma of what happened back then stayed with me all throughout my adulthood. And I really was so lost. I felt broken. I was depressed, full of anxiety. I was living half a life, or not even close to a life. I had, tried to commit suicide at 14. And there were so many different pieces of the puzzle that I didn't understand were an impact from my past. And I wanted to really push through, but I didn't understand how. I kept falling into the same trappings of attracting toxic relationships, making very, very bad decisions for myself because I didn't feel enough love. I had zero self-esteem. I didn't even know what self-love meant. I had no clue where to begin or where to start or what to do about it. And so, I ended up getting married and having children. And at one point, I decided to just confront my father and talk to him about my pain. And at that point, it was a really jarring day. It happened a little over 2 years ago. And it was the same day my best friend died in a car accident from a drunk driver. And she was so young. And I remember the last thing she said to me was, "How did your talk with your dad go?" And that was the last thing that I heard from her. And I thought, after that happened, I realized that life is way too short and that I couldn't harbor any more resentment or any more anger. I needed to shift and change in order to become, the real me underneath all of the fear, all of the heartache, all of the hurt. And so at that point, I had a conversation with my dad, and I basically said, listen, either you understand and acknowledge what happened, and you validate what took place and you recognize that things need to change, or I will never see you again, speak to you again. I don't need you in my life for me to be whole. And that was a really brave thing for me at the time. And we ended up having the first real honest conversation we'd ever had in my entire life. And from there, the book was born. I sent it to him, and he asked to write a letter at the end. And basically my story is one of, hope, forgiveness, redemption. And it just kind of reminds us that, love is the only precursor to anything. It heals all wounds. It really does cause you to see that life is more meaningful than the ugliness we sometimes give it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. And so tell us about the book that you wrote.
Yes, so this is my book. I don't know.
Yeah,
Does it look backwards to you guys? No, it doesn't.
mm-hmm.
Does it? Oh, this way.
Yeah.
So this is my book. It is a children's book, but in the back also, I talk about how to transform anger into love. I talk about how to communicate with each other in a way that is coming from a place of wholeness and healing. And I really just want people to understand that victims of child abuse are not just victims, but they turn into survivors and they can turn into thrivers. And so a big part of this overall messaging is if and when we have the opportunity to stop and think and decide how we're going to behave and how we're going to respond, if we can do it from a place of love, that's what I hope for all of us. We react so easily out of anger a lot of the time, and we have no idea the kind of impact it has, especially on children. As a child, you know, when you yell at a kid, when you're upset with them, when you punch, when you hit, when you kick, when you demean, a child does not look at themselves and say, oh, wow, I love my parent or my caregiver or whoever any less. I love myself less. And so that's something that I'm just on this lifelong mission to make sure that does not happen to anybody else.
It's beautiful. And it's just a beautiful way. The kid's story, so approachable in the conversation, because you can just sense that's a very guarded topic to step into. For both the hurt and for anyone who's feeling like, oh, I just yelled at somebody today. And, you know, nobody knows the backstory. All you know is what's happening right now in that moment. And you can't take those words back. So there's a lot of pain that comes from those moments. There's shame from being someone who is in that role, lashing out. There is pain from receiving it. And so I talked about a bit earlier, but what does pain have to do with holding us back from a meaningful life?
Well, you know, we all have our stories that we tell ourselves. And part of, you know, what I'm doing now is I'm going to be starting a whole branch of coaching called Heal Your Story, because if we are consistently stuck in our story of victimhood and we don't bust out of that and we don't give ourselves the opportunity to rise above and beyond, you know, the sadness of what we've experienced, that pain keeps us trapped, and we end up living and reliving that same trauma over and over again, as opposed to being in the present moment, as opposed to looking forward to the future, as opposed to recognizing that we can take back our strength and step into our power and really become, you know, the version of ourselves that's always been underneath. And so I think, you know, being able to really acknowledge, to sit in it and feel it and then release that pain is absolutely imperative. One of the things that I've just learned over the years is I came up with this little acronym called FEEL. And so it's called face it, embrace it, extract the goodness from it, and then let it go. I firmly believe that everything in life is a lesson. There's something we can take from it, no matter how horrific or how painful or how jarring. And so if we can do that, that is what is going to give us the impetus and the courage to see that, no, you know what? Our pain doesn't have to be our story. And it certainly doesn't have to end in pain. We have the opportunity to choose what that's going to look like and what we do from here on out. And so if we can leave a legacy, instead of leaving a legacy of generational pain and hurt and abuse, why can't we leave a legacy of healing and love?
Absolutely. So what did that do for you when you confronted your father and knowing full well that doesn't mean that's the answer to everyone's path to healing, or that's the best step? For sure. Everybody's story is different. Everybody's situation, all the factors involved are different. But what would be the key components for healing your story? The 4 step, you have kind of 4 steps that you walk people through. or that you noticed, and it would be the common denominator and the common, principles that someone can go from pain to wholeness.
Mm-hmm. I think it's acknowledging. The first thing we can do is acknowledge our story and what contributed to what we're suffering through now. So if you are going through a lot of pain and anguish, if you are struggling with, the toughness of what you've been through, is saying, hey, this is what it is that I faced. This is what it is. I understand it. I know where it came from, right? And then looking at, so first of all, acknowledging it. The second step would be owning it as a part of your story and knowing that, yes, it's okay. This is something that made me who I am today, and appreciating it for what it is. And the third thing I would say is being able to transform that pain into purpose. So when you know that you have it and you've dealt with it, you know where it's come from. So if it is an abusive past, if it is, whatever your experience has been, is to say, yes, this was the trauma, but how can I look at this trauma and say, how has it made me strong? What can I do with this story so that I can utilize that as fuel, positive fuel, instead of angry fuel? Instead of blaming or feeling shame, is to convert that into beautiful ownership of, I live my own life. My feelings are my responsibility. Even though something is not my fault, how I respond is up to me. How I live my life is up to me. Right. Mm-hmm. And then, the last thing I would say is self-love is the key to everything. When we know that it is up to us to really choose a path, like we can choose the pain or we can choose the healing, and to say, you know what, I'm worth it. I am more than enough. I am deserving of love because I am love. That's how you change. That's how you shift. And that's how you kind of, in a way, lovingly detach yourself from the pain. So, that's something that I think is key. If you don't have self-love, you can't really, go beyond your past painful story, because you don't realize that, you're worth living for. And when you know that, then everything just changes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so doesn't say, nice for tidy, simple steps. Doesn't mean it's easy.
It's not.
There's a huge, it's freeing. I remember the times I would never have called myself a victim in my own story before. I would have not been happy if anyone had said that. But looking back as I was writing my own book, and looking back in from a different place of maturity, realizing, wow, I really did have a lot of victim mindset where I wanted to blame others for where I was or not choosing my answer. I wanted someone else to come and rescue me from it, but I didn't really know what I wanted or what I needed rescuing. And so it's hard for anybody to be able to do that. And people, looking back, I can see they would reach out with these words of kindness or, direction or hope, but I didn't recognize them for that until I decided, okay, this is my choice. I'm going to do that. In my book, I call them dares. And the very first one in the introduction of the book is dare to believe in myself. Basically, it was dare to believe what God believes about me. And basically, if I said I believed this so much, I wasn't acting it. And all of a sudden I had to marry the two together if I was going to go anywhere. And I didn't feel like it at the time. It wasn't like I magically believed in myself. It started with me choosing to act like I was going to, because belief without action isn't a belief. That's not what you believe. It's not the faith. And so I use the word dare because it doesn't mean it's easy. It's scary. It's something you have to rise up to. And it's something you become the more you practice it, the more you step out into it, and the more you start believing, like, okay, I can be healed. It's not just for somebody else. I can choose love. There is another way. And I can be not defined by my own resentment. That's not going to hold me bondage anymore. And then there's so much help out there. Once you decide to take that ownership, it's not finding what that answer is, who's going to help me, where I'm going to have it. When you're ready to show up for, okay, I'm ready for this wholeness now. Where do I start? That's when you start recognizing, oh, well, there's this person's story. How did they get from here to there? Start asking different questions. Like, okay, well, how do I let go of this resentment? How do I live from love instead of fear? And when you start asking those questions, those answers start appearing differently. The people start stepping into your life that need
magically.
Yeah, it's amazing, right?
Yeah. It is. It's unbelievable. And I think light attracts light. I see some beautiful light people jumping on right now. Deirdre Maloney has been amazing. She and I have really connected. We met because she's also a fellow author, but, you know, she's been through a great deal of abuse herself. And, you know, it's amazing to me when you just reach out and you open your heart, who and what reaches back. And, you know, once we surround ourselves with this kind of a network of people, of energy, as you were saying, Emily, like, I think it's so important. It's a vibrational energy. It's knowing that it's the action combined with the belief, combined with the knowing. And when that happens, it's such a beautiful, you know, symbiosis, right? It just becomes this gorgeous, almost, you know, cataclysmic, miraculous event that, you know, my heart connects to yours, connects to someone else's, connects to someone else's. And then you suddenly become so emboldened by everybody else's energy of healing. And then you say, I am not alone in this. I am not alone. And, you know, I think if we connect to each other's stories that way, that's what changes us. Like, I think the one other thing that I think is so important that I talk about in the book is with my father. You know, hi, Dad, if you're watching or you're going to see this later, he's 12 hours difference in Hong Kong, so you might be in a different time zone. But, you know, what's so beautiful is I recognize that he was abused every day of his life. He was hit every day of his life. So what else did he know but abuse? So when he was raising us, he didn't have that opportunity of seeing and recognizing and understanding in the moment what he was doing wrong. And to be able to say, hey, you know what? I did do something really wrong here, and I want to remedy it. I want to fix it. You know, and that's the beautiful hope that came from my story. But this is the thing, like, releasing the pain of your unforgiveness is important too. Even if you never get to talk to your abuser, even if you never get that reconciliation, that's okay, because you have to reconcile it in here, because that lack of moving forward is what holds us back.
Yeah. All right. So if you're watching now or the replay, write hope in the comments. Just hope. Because that's what it starts with. It starts with, you don't have to have the answers of how to get there. You don't have to have even the answers of what that would look like in your life. Sometimes that is hindering when you picture it, you know, this is what it should look like. It won't necessarily look that way. Your story might not unfold the way that you are picturing it, or the way maybe someone else's did. But those steps that you take, it starts with having the hope that maybe who I am now and where I'm stuck, maybe that's not how I have to be the rest of my life. And for some of my moments, that's all that it started with, is just, what if I'm actually not stuck here the rest of my life? I have no idea what that would look like. And I would have to start imagining, what would it look like if I was more confident, if I wasn't living from insecurity, if I embraced who I am in the message I have, instead of trying to be like somebody else. Just the way imagining something else was different to be able to do that. And so that is our hope for you. And I would love to know in the comments too, if there is a time that you look back, because I believe there's moments where you already did step out into this. You weren't defined by this one big thing that's hanging over you right now. Chances are you stepped out, realized you own something, turned it around, and it could be so small. Could be cleaning up your kid's spill without complaining this time, realizing, actually, I'm just going to be grace-filled and clean this up for them. I've had a few of those moments too. And, just owning the moment differently. So in the comments, I want you to think through right now, what was the moment that you owned? And what was a moment where you realized, actually, this is coming from a sense of bitterness or resentment or anger, and you turn that around in that moment and said, actually, no, I'm going to live from a place of love or ownership or grace. And so type that, give it some thought, but don't overthink it. Just type it in the comments. And because there's a little victory there, realizing, well, if you did it in one area, there's a possibility you can do that in another area too. And again, it starts with a question. It starts with that hope that there's got to be a way this can happen somehow. And for you, it was a lot of writing. You said a lot of this even started unveiling. I thought I remember you saying that in one of your stories, that writing had to do a role. How did writing have a role to play in this?
I ended up writing a lot of poetry even when I was younger and suffering so greatly because I had no other outlet. I sang a lot. I wrote songs and I just sang them to myself in my room, and everything just sort of helped to, you know, solidify the fact that I had a voice and that I had to use it, even if it was by myself, and it still helped, you know. And I think people have to see that there's so many beautiful gifts that we all have individually that we can use as a coping mechanism. So definitely dig deep and look for those. Like writing is amazing. Journaling is amazing. Sometimes just writing it out and putting down on paper helps to get it out of our body. It doesn't let it sit there unnoticed or untouched. And when you put something down in writing and you look at it and you kind of mull it over, it starts to have different meaning and give you some insight that you might not have had before. So I love the idea of just, you know, pouring your feelings out. It is so crucial to releasing and recognizing that you can make space for something better and brighter.
It's beautiful. All right, Cecilia, where can people find your book if they want to check that out?
Yeah, so I am on Amazon, but if you guys are interested, I am mailing out signed copies of my book. So, you know, you can email me at Cecelia@CeciliaTement.com. Just check out my website. I'm so happy to connect with you there. There's a link to purchase my book as well. And I would love to talk to any of you if there's anything that you have on your mind or your heart, or you've suffered through some trauma. I am here to help you heal your story.
Oh, that's great. Okay, we've got your link in the comments there to your website. I know there's links for your book there as well.
Yes.
And that is beautiful. Cecilia, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And
oh, thank you, Emily. You've been amazing. I just love you. Can't wait to read your book. Here's this coming out.
Thank you. Yes, so the book comes out July 23rd. If all things go smoothly. The ebook is up for pre-sale right now on Amazon. The rest are slowly rolling through. So yes, either one. If you need some summer reading material for you or your kids, good conversation starters, there you go. There's 2 ideas right there. All right.
Thanks to everybody for jumping on. Hi, everybody.
Lovely evening. Take care.
Bye.